Vince, you're on mute, I think.
Oh, I'll try that again. Apologies. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to continue our Confessions of Speaker series. As a housekeeping note, these will be housed on our YouTube channel. My name is Vincent Kimura. I'm with University of Hawaii's Office of Innovation and Commercialization under Vice President Vasil Sermos and Director Stephen Auerbach. I'm one of the many members within the Office of Research Innovation whose mission is to support the very talented faculty, staff, and students across the UH system. I'm humbled today to have a very old friend and a very well-seasoned entrepreneur who's helped hundreds of companies find, hire talent for almost 3 decades. And now he's walking the talk. Before I begin, I wanted to quickly mention a couple of other housekeeping things. Our program within OIC, particularly that I have purview over, is called High Tide. It was previously called Ideation Studio. We are an incubator program, 12 to 24 months. If you or someone you know is interested in getting support in taking your idea to reality, we highly encourage you to reach out to us and apply. Applications are currently open. We have informational and one-on-one sessions going on for the rest of the month. And real quick, I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the Startup Paradise information. So there are a number of programs and funding opportunities, including some of those here. And if you are interested in funding, we have a long list and growing list of venture capital as well as angels. We just added a new one called Decisive Point. If you're interested in the technology side, HTDC's SBI, SCCR Phase 0, as well as their matching programs are of great interest. Last quick housekeeping item is upcoming. End of October, the HTDC has their Pacific Tech Conference, focusing mostly on sippers and sitters. And our office has our annual conference as well. So I'm, again, really pleased to have Rick Girard join us. Rick has so much to share, a part of his 3 decades within the industry, supporting technology companies. And I wouldn't be able to introduce him better than he is. So please, Rick, take it away.
All right. Hey, thanks for having me, Vincent. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and everybody else who's here. Gosh, it's funny. I don't really talk, I don't sell myself that well either. So it's kind of one of those things where, I've been an entrepreneur for a very long time. I started out as an executive recruiter. I've worked primarily in the San Francisco Bay Area, the tech industry, since the .com days. So I've been around for quite some time. I kind of fell into it by accident, and because I had gone to art school and I was going to be a professional photographer, and ended up getting burned out on that, and decided, hey, I'll give this recruiting thing a try. And I moved to Idaho to learn how to recruit, primarily to snowboard, and ended up falling into a career. And it was probably the hardest thing that I had ever done. I remember, it was a lot of cold calling, and I kept getting hung up on by pretty much everyone for a good, 6 months. It was pretty brutal. But I stuck with it. I persevered through it. I got good at it. And I was able to kind of be part of building a company, and then I built another recruiting firm. I had moved from Idaho back to California. We built up a third recruiting firm, and I was fortunate enough to be able to exit, pack up all my stuff, and move to Hawaii. I sold everything that I didn't need, and I moved to Hawaii for a little over 10 years. I was there, and I still consider it my home. I still kind of go back whenever I can, but while in Hawaii, I was fortunate enough to meet a lot of great people like Vincent and some other good entrepreneurs. I had a little startup that I did with a couple friends that didn't really get off the ground, and then I also had a recruiting firm that we did recruiting in the San Francisco Bay Area from Hawaii, and it was a great experience. I had some great people that I hired, and it was just, yeah, I've got nothing to complain about, obviously, right? So a few years ago, I decided actually to pack up and move back to California, which I've been here for a few years now, really because of the opportunity and what we're building from a technical perspective. So I developed kind of a methodology by which startups can plug a interviewing process into their business. And what the results have been kind of remarkable. We've been getting about a 90 to 98% success rate on hires that we've done with our clients. And basically what it is step-by-step process that's all completely mapped out. It's built around your core values of your company. And if you're an entrepreneur and you don't have core values, I recommend that as soon as you're done with this thing, go do them. Because when you have them, your chances of being successful are that much higher. But I'll get off that soapbox for a moment. So we started developing this AI-based solution, which we're getting ready to roll out. It actually rolls out at the end of the month. And I'm really excited. The name of the company is InterTrue. And that's pretty much it. A little bit like about me from a personal perspective. I'm a surfer. Well, you can't tell by my hair, horrible tan right now, but that was one of the reasons why I moved to Hawaii, was to be able to surf every day, and be immersed in such a great place. And then while I was there, I picked up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that's been kind of my passion and my thing that it's keeping me in shape these days, is going and getting beat up by young kids who are much better at that than I.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate having you on, Rick. And for those of you who haven't seen, Rick actually hosts a Higher Power radio show and podcast. So I'm super humbled to be able to be interviewing you this time.
And which you've been on, and you were a fantastic guest, by the way.
Oh, I appreciate it.
If you haven't heard the episode, guys, go check it out.
You're just saying that.
Quiet about it. No, there was some good content out there that we put out.
So I'm gonna go back a little bit. We talked about, when you moved to Idaho, we talked about the first 6 months was the worst job ever.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to share for us, kind of that you called it the George Costanza moment. But tell us more about that.
Yeah. So it was weird. I remember so vividly. I had, the way that the recruiting business works, if you don't know, is that essentially, if you're a recruiter, you're setting up as many interviews as possible, and hopefully some falls on the bottom and you make a placement and then you get paid on it. And so I was maybe 5, 6 months in, 7 months in, and I was starting to get my bearings and starting to get the hang of it a little bit. And it's a grind. And essentially I had a Friday where I had like 5 people that were at the offer stage that all got offers. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to crush it this month. I was already in my head studying the money. I'm going to go buy a jet ski. I don't know. I was already like kind of, figuring out what I was going to do with the money. And by 2:30 p.m., every single person turned down the offer. And I was like devastated. And so I went home early. I was just, I sat on my couch with a big bowl of ice cream and decided I was just gonna just mellow out because I was super stressed, right? And I didn't know how I was gonna pay my rent. So I started kind of eating ice cream, and Seinfeld's on, and it was that episode where George Costanza does the opposite. So he decides he's gonna his quote was like, if every decision I make is the wrong one, then the opposite should be the right one. So he started doing the opposite. And as a result, all of a sudden he meets a girl, and the theme going through the rest of the kind of episodes after that is like and he gets a job with the Yankees, moves out of his parents' house. And it's all because he did what was not, which was contrary to popular belief, right? And so I kind of had that aha moment too. I kept thinking, well, okay, look at it. We're doing the same thing as everybody else. We're basically just a commodity. We recruit people, we send out resumes, and we just hope that something sticks. So then I just decided at that point, I need to get better, and I need to get better than my competitors and provide more value and do something different that sets me aside from everybody else. And so that's what I set out to do. It took me a long time to get there, but I feel like it's my purpose.
And a lot of that stemmed from you had to reinvent your business model.
Yeah, yeah. So I was in Hawaii. We were working still with a lot of tech companies. I had a small team. We had our office on 1132 Bishop. Great view of the water. I could see I could see bowls from my office. So it was great. I decided that the kind of contingency model really wasn't a model that was working for me, because it was all about volume and sending lots of people out, and it really wasn't about providing quality work. And so I shifted the business model from contingency to a full retained search model, where we work with companies and essentially, like, not only do we find the people, but as the company has evolved, we've added interview process for each company that we work with. Because I found that the biggest challenge that every company has in hiring is that none of us know how to interview. We've never been trained. So, like, basically, if you think about it, your very first job that you ever had, Vincent, I don't know what that might have been. Mine was Burger King. I feel like my very first interview that I did at Burger King when I was 15 is probably the same interview that you get, maybe a little bit more in depth, that you get at most companies. And so we've learned how to ask a bunch of questions, but they're not tied to anything. And the thing that really resonated for me, the reason why this aha moment for this was, I had a company that's actually a pretty well-known company now, and we were looking for a head of engineering for them. And I remember having a conversation with the CEO, and I said, I was debriefing with the CEO after the interview, and I said, how did the interview go? And he's like, great, we want to hire this person. I said, okay, great, tell me about the interview. Well, we talked about 45 minutes about the Oakland A's. We had the same favorite players, so both of our favorite team. They talked about baseball for 45 minutes. And I lost it. I was, well, okay, but wait, so how do you know this person is going to be great then? You're the CEO of the company. How is it that you think that that's an okay conversation to have and make a decision based off of? And I realized, and as we dug a little bit deeper, I realized he didn't know what to ask people. He had a great idea. He had a great company. He kind of relied on some of the people that interviewed him prior, but they didn't really dig into anything that had to do with whether or not he fit the organization. They just dug into whether or not he had the skills. And as I've learned too, is that most interviews are fairly shallow. You ask somebody a question, they give you either, one of their canned responses. It either goes, okay, that sounds great, we'll check that one off my box and I'll move on to the next question. And nobody really ever digs underneath the hood of, okay, well, let me test this now. You told me you've done this, walk me through how you did that. What are the steps that you took? And so that was kind of the start of, hey, look at, we need to start putting an interview process into place for each company, because they need the help. And it took us a little while to develop that. It took quite a few years for us to really hone it in. And we start with every company, we start with building our core values, then we build our interview questions around the core values, and then we take those excuse me, we take those the language and around that. You also build it into your job descriptions. We took the job description, flipped it upside down, made it less boring to read, made it more like a marketing document. We made it like a syllabus, right? So adding performance metrics of like exactly what you're going to accomplish in 30, 60, 90 days. So we started creating a success-based menu that is going to draw A players to your company. And by the way, if you're a startup, you don't need to hire anything your first 10, 20, 50 people other than A players. And if you're not, you're going to end up with the same haircut I have, unnaturally. So that's in a nutshell how I got to that.
I want to pause before we kind of really dive into some of the weeds of things with, the to-dos and the pitfalls part of it. But you said something to me earlier about social dynamics.
Yeah.
And not to get into too much weeds, but I feel it's very valuable because it's again the psychology, the primitive brain part of it too. Could you talk about that? Because I feel like it's a very important component within your own individual career, but also the aha in terms of where you've come from.
Probably in terms of my own personal evolution too. Like I learned so much in Hawaii. I had so many opportunities to meet people who, so I met this guy. His name was Owen, and he had been part of the pickup artist community. And I went out with him like one night to kind of see them work. Basically they pick up chicks. That's their whole business. And but one of the aha moments for me was that one of the things he said is attraction can be built. And so you may not be somebody's type, but attraction is something that if you're in kind of the primal brain, right? If you're dealing in that realm of thought, you can build attraction with people. It's not necessarily you can build chemistry with people. You can build connection with people. And so that was kind of one of the things that I pulled away from that. And of course, then I started thinking, okay, well, how do I build this into recruiting? How do I build this into a business, right? Because I'm not trying to teach people how to pick up the opposite sex or the same sex, whatever you're into. But what I'm here to do, I'm thinking, okay, well, what attracts somebody to a job and what detracts it, what repels somebody from a job, right? And a lot of times, one of the things that I realized is, as a recruiter, I was going into sales mode. And as an entrepreneur, you go into sales mode. And you meet somebody and you're like, they have the right skills. I need this person. And you already made the decision that you want to hire this person, unknowing anything about them, just based on their background or pedigree or whatever your own personal biases are. And then you start selling. You go into it, hey, I'm building this. We're going to change the world. It's going to be amazing. And here's the opportunity. What can I get you to sign? How do I get you on board, right? And what I realized is that people don't want to hear you talk. They don't care about your opportunity. But what they do care about is what's in it for them, right? So if you're trying to attract somebody, the best thing you can do is listen, not talk, not sell. And it's a hard mind shift to get to that point. But once you get there, it becomes very easy to have conversations with people and just listen, because I do a lot. I recruit a lot of engineers in our business, and they tend to be more introverted, and they're not like a lot of outgoing people. But what's interesting is that once I get them talking, wow, everything comes out. It's like, well, let me tell you my whole life story, and it's great. It's great data, right? And then if I listen, I can understand one, whether or not they're positioned well for my organization, if what they want or what they desire is what my company is, then great, I can continue forward. I don't need to sell them. All I have to do is connect the dots for them. And that was kind of the thinking behind this whole thing. Is like, what if your brain kind of operates like a series of light switches? You know, you just turn on, turn off, and you know, if I tell you all these things about my company, oh, off, not interested. Okay, I'm gonna just move on to the next thing, right? Because attention spans have gotten shorter, and if I'm not hitting something that is relevant or important to you, you don't want to hear it. You don't care. But if you tell me kind of 2 or 3 things that are important to you, and then I feed it back to you because that's what my organization is, now it becomes a much more powerful tool, and we can engage in a conversation as to whether or not we can benefit each other. And that, my friends, is kind of the key to getting A players to join you today. Like, listening. It's not about selling, it's about identifying people that are good, understanding them first, and then essentially being able to connect the dots for them as to how your company adds value to them.
So now that you're sitting on the other side of the table, you've been helping companies with, both small scale, mid scale, large scale, and now you decided, okay, I'm going to be, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and actually be a startup entrepreneur. So that's
Yeah.
pretty both enjoyable, fun, scary, all the above. And you said something
There's one
earlier.
translation that said, like, starting up a company, you only feel 2 feelings: terror and exhilaration. Something like that.
It's part of the reason why there's folks like serial entrepreneurs like yourself too, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned
Yeah.
something about the whole process and bringing the right person from start to finish.
Yeah.
Could you talk about how you essentially started this company? Your expectations document with your co-founder.
Yeah. So I've talked to a lot of people and I've had a lot of conversations, and I started probably about a year ago. I started in conversations with people, looking for, my technical lead. Like, I'm looking for my co-founders, and I started this practice probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and I teach it to some of the CEOs that I work with. Is that, especially if you're a founder, dedicate 1 hour on Friday of each week just to, like, hop on LinkedIn, identify 2 or 3 people that you think might be good, throw them in a spreadsheet, and then reach out to them and start to develop a relationship. It's great practice, especially if you're trying to build a good company, strong company, right? Because the truth is that all the best people are working already. They're not on job boards. Contrary to the Indeed commercials where you get unicorns or whatever, I've rarely come across people who are like really solid A players on job boards. Rarely. Like, I think I've placed one maybe in the past 20 years. And actually, I haven't even used a job board in probably the past 20 years. Which, by the way, just a sidetrack note, because this is where my brain works. If you're working with recruiters and that's where they get all their people, they're selling job boards, you're better off just hiring an admin, paying them really well, and essentially, joining the job boards and letting them filter people for you. So now your recruiters are going to hate me, but yeah, it's I think that's it.
Okay. Well, one of the things you said was really interesting, and reflecting on your comment earlier about not selling.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the alignment. You said something about providing that level of kind of feedback loop to really identify what are their interests, needs, and then for you as the hirer to really kind of set them up for success.
Yeah.
I think if you can kind of contrast that with what you're trying to build, this whole Hire OS platform, simply stated, because nobody knows how to interview.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I didn't answer your question about the expectations, Dr. Last question, right? And what that was. Well, can I go back to that real quick? All right, cool. So when I found people, what I did is I created this thing called an expectation stock. What is it that I expect? What is it you expect? I have conversations with them. But if we're going to build a company together, I want to know exactly what your expectations are, and you should know what mine are. And so I've had everybody kind of fill out this expectation stock, who I considered, and I probably did like 8 or 9 of those until I found awesome. And then basically you have the conversation. Hey, are we in alignment? Is where I want to go with the company where you want to go with your life? Are we set to succeed here? Or are we setting ourselves up to fail? And we ask some really difficult questions. It's just being honest and forthright. It's really hard to do, by the way, especially like I found myself hitting that urge where I'm like, I just want to get this done. I just want to get somebody to do the work and just start this off and get it done. And I fought that urge for like 6 months. Like it was crazy. I'm like, so you're gonna have to fight your inner demons on that one, probably, especially if you're like, well, I'm falling behind on this. I need to get it done. And I find that that's where we get into trouble. So I really had to walk the talk.
Well, that's a perfect segue into really the meat of things.
Yeah.
The core values are critical.
Yeah.
And you said something before, start with a strong foundation.
Yeah, I mean, you're building a house, right? Like if you think about building a company, I don't know why, but like somebody gave me this analogy, like, if you think of a company, you need to pour the foundation first. You need to have everything written down, mapped out, like operationally. But we don't do that. We kind of we focus on the product development, we focus in on like what the business is, and we figure, oh, we'll just get back to that later on down the road. So basically you're building a house on no foundation. Big wind comes and then boom, you get blown over. And you got to start all over again. So the core values thing, and I could probably feel some of you thinking, oh God, what, our core values just like they're just BS, like they're not real. And for some companies, because a lot of large companies run core values that really aren't real. Those are all aspirational. For startups, you take advantage of that. You think of like who you are and how you want to build the organization. And you think about what is the North Star that I'm giving each person in my organization to succeed. So how do they make decisions? Well, if you have core values written down, right, and you've got some language around what those core values mean, and then some measurables that define out like what those, what that means a little bit further. Now we've got a situation where people can make the right decisions. They're not just guessing, right? And then how people interact with the organization, same thing. So you're essentially setting yourself up for success by just taking a half a day, sitting down with your co-founders and going, who are we really? And that's the thing. You don't want to have aspirational values, right? They need to be real. They need to be how you guys operate on a daily basis. And I do this with a lot of CEOs pretty much weekly now. And, that's the hardest part. Everybody's like, well, we're a family company. Are you really? Like, let's talk about that. And I challenge, you got to challenge each other on it and say, okay, is this really how we operate? And if it's not, then throw it out and start over again, and then come up with, you really only need 4. 2 is good too. Like you don't need a whole lot. You just need something by which you can evaluate people to see whether or not they align with you. So between 2 and 4, you don't need like Amazon's got like 17, core values. I don't even know how that's possible, but
It's a big company.
yeah, yeah,
You mentioned by not aligning that North Star, we essentially set ourselves up for failure
yeah,
and really define the culture. And you said something really profound to me, which I definitely can resonate from past experiences. If you weren't living your values and defining it, how do you expect others to find them, attract them in, and then, have them help you build this startup?
yeah,
Because values are clearly not aspirational, you know.
yeah. Here's a really interesting thing that I noticed after COVID. Like we all got sent home, right? And people really started to think about what was important to them. And guess what? Like over the past couple of years, as on our recruiting practice, I don't hear very often that money is a big concern. And it's more about growth, and it's more about me being able to provide an impact to the company. It's about me being able to like do something more, have a purpose. It's a lot more driven toward self-fulfillment than it is monetary compensation. And you don't hear that kind of in the mainstream news at all. You hear all these companies going, well, we're just going to beef up our benefits programs and we're going to pay people a lot more money. What's funny is like you're just throwing, a band-aid on a gaping wound. And so, which is good for us. As entrepreneurs, we tap that person on the shoulder at the right time. It's really hard for the company to be able to beat value over compensation, because that's all they come back with most of the time. Well, we'll just give you more money. It's not really flying anymore, which is great.
Well, clearly your data point kind of tends towards the whole idea around the Great Resignation as well.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that's like people are just tired of like working for bad bosses or bosses they didn't align with, right? And that's how people that's why people left. And here's the thing about values too, that's true, is that it doesn't matter what your values are. Somebody's going to align with them. So if you have what's called a toxic culture, right? And that's how you guys operate and you're successful, put it out there. I mean, don't say you have a toxic culture, but put that language out there. The right people will resonate with it. There's a lot of people that do really well in toxic cultures. I like to call them hunter cultures, right? Like, you get like boiler rooms where it's like, you don't get any attention from anybody until you bring in your first million in revenue. And, your teammates are going to stab you in the back at every chance they get. Like, but there's people that do well at those. Who doesn't do well are the people who read the core values, and the core values said, we have high integrity and we're all about teamwork and, all these things that are not true. Right. And then that's when the companies get into trouble. Yeah. There's no teamwork on Wall Street.
Live your values, right? Well, the other thing, data points really fascinating, especially around the technology sector, is the movement for a lot of these larger tech giants like Facebook and Google. They're no longer requiring 4-year degrees. They're actually actively seeking individuals who align more on past performance and experience.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I took a lot of what I learned from Amazon. I did an Amazon interview years ago. And, I think their number one core, what's it called? Their leadership principles, right? Their number one leadership principle is customer obsession, right? And so when you go into interview with them, like 75% of the interview is about whether or not you align with whatever core values. And, so tell me about a time you had a difficult customer, okay, great. Now it's up to me to demonstrate that I can show that I was obsessed about a customer and was able to make that customer a happy customer. So, and they really kind of dig into, all right, what happened? How did that work? Why is that important? And arguably, Amazon's done it right, I think, from the very, very beginning, from the early days, because that's been part of their interview process for a very, very long time. So they are the largest employer, are they not, in the world right now? Or one of them?
Definitely one of them.
Yeah. So you know, that kind of growth doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design.
Well, if you haven't read Conscious Capitalism, it's definitely a alignment component around a lot of the different entrepreneurs and technology startups moving more towards a, let's call it impact focus or ESG focus. So,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to switch gears real quick.
Yep.
So I think, you've helped a lot of companies out there. And actually we have a Hawaii-based company too, Chakanan, High Tech Hui,
Yeah.
Cyberactive. Yeah, I'd love for you to share kind of the how. I mean, again, we've got folks listening in who are just saying, okay, I agree with you. Now tell me, how the heck do I do this? How do I
Yeah.
define this? How do I attract the right people?
And by the way, shout out to those guys. They just made Inc. 5000. Yay. That's crushing it. Good for them. Um, so, okay. So, it's really not that difficult. I mean, it first starts with sitting down and writing down your core values, and then designing interview questions around that. If you don't know anything about interviewing styles, behavioral interviewing questions, like what Amazon asks, are by far the easiest to create, and they surface the best evidence, right? So I don't want to talk about recruiting because, like, there's so many different ways you can go to job boards, you can work with a recruiter. Like, there's so many ways to get people in your funnel. But the problem is, once you get them in your funnel, are you progressing the right people, or are you like repelling the right people, right? And I think we do a lot of wrong as far as we look at a resume and go, oh, this person went to XYZ, they went to UH, or this person worked for XYZ company, and then we make assumptions. What we've done is we've actually, like, the most important part of the interview process to me is that first phone call, your phone screening call. And you can actually have an admin do it, but you got to give them a script on how to do it properly. It's called a discovery call. We kind of flipped the script on it. We spend 45 minutes for somebody that comes all the way through the process. It's about a 45-minute call. And the reason is because we want to understand two things. One, is this person positioned right for our company? And two, do I have an A, B, or C player here? Do I have somebody who's really good at what they do? And that can be done really easily in a phone screen. And I think that's the one point of contact. Your first point of contact is the most important in how that person judges you. So you should look at it from the perspective of taking it more seriously, because of the fact that when they have a really good, well-connected phone conversation, they show up for the interview. I had a slew of CEOs last year that were complaining about people. One company had a 30% show up rate for interviews they had scheduled. 30. How much time was that wasting of everybody, right? Just people not showing up, clearing their schedules. And so when we flipped that around, when we had an admin go in and do a discovery call, we got it up to like 85%. So we still had no shows, but still, like, you also have to realize that talent is kind of in control. So why not let them be proactive? Why not let them lead the process? They're the ones really making the decision. They're in the driver's seat. If you got somebody who's really strong, they can either stay where they are, they can join you, or they can go to somebody else who's wooed them a little bit better, right? So allow them to run the process. When I wrap up the discovery call, I go, hey, here's where I think that you match. Here's where you don't match. What would you like to do? And if I've connected the dots for them properly, it's usually, yeah, I'd like to talk to this company. I think that would be great. And then now they've asked for the interview, they're going to show up. Now, when you get to the interview, it's really easy. You just want to, and actually, if anybody's interested, I'll send Vincent kind of our map of how the interview process works. But essentially, the first interview is a values aligned interview. And what that means is the interview questions are assigned to an interviewer. It doesn't matter if that person's in the department or not, they just have to be somebody in the company, and they need to be trained on how to extract evidence to support whether or not somebody aligns with those values. And then the second interview, excuse me, is what we call a working session. This is where we test the skills. And what we found is that it's highly, highly effective when you bring somebody into the organization, you design a problem, and they work with the team to solve that problem. It shows you how they problem solve, how they communicate, how well they fit into the organization. And usually, if it's a challenging problem, somebody, they become more attracted to the company because you've got something that like they want to do. And then finally, you wrap up with a third interview, which is another values-based interview, and it becomes, again, very easy to kind of evaluate whether or not they align with the organization. Every decision should be either a hell yes or a no. There's no maybes in hiring, by the way. You kind of have to think of it like dating, right? Maybe I'll go out with the person. Yeah, I don't know.
Swipe left, swipe right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's think of your interview like Tinder. I don't know. I haven't been on that a lot ever, but yeah. So if you're doing a good job in the interview process, you have hard evidence to be able to say yes or no, and essentially you can move somebody through the process. You don't have these, well, I don't know, let's see if we can find somebody else. Let's talk to more people. By the way, you don't have options to talk to a lot more people these days, unless you somehow have built a huge kind of PR engine around you that's like hopping up your company like crazy. You probably don't, or if you got Andreessen Horowitz backing you or something like that. But for the most part, you don't have the options to talk to a lot of people. So waiting to make a decision, just basically you're just telling them no. I mean, essentially that person's going to turn down your offer probably, or you're going to lose them because somebody else is going to go after them quickly. So it should be a definitive yes or no. And again, you create the scenario where, hey, look, we think you're great and we'd love to have you join us. What would you like to do? And people will tell you, hey, yeah, I'd love to work here. Here's why. Okay, great. So let's talk. Like, what would we need to do to get you on board? And you'll find that, like, if you've done it right, the money becomes not the big negotiating piece. It becomes more about, well, I see how I can do this, and I see my growth path here, and the work that you're doing is exactly what I want to do. So I don't know, just something fair, like, what's your ballpark? I've had people that have taken 100K pay cuts to go take roles because they saw more value in the organization. I mean, think about that. They got a lot more equity, but still. They made up for it in the back end.
Well, I think for the perspective of a lot of the folks in the audience too, these are very early stage. And with University of Hawaii too, we have a lot of really amazing researchers. So they have the CTO, they have the technology, they have the intimate understanding of how that works as a novel IP. Talk to us about some of the challenges in terms of finding the other side of the coin, right? I mean, you're kind of the biz ops that, kind of founder on your side of things, but talk to us about some of those things. How do these folks find those individuals? And because you're right, the money is not something that we currently have.
Yeah. So what do you mean by that?
In the sense of, we haven't done a Series A raise, or I mean, it's very very early.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just, it's based on what the individual is desires, right? It's, you know, I tend to look at it from the perspective, like, if I can find a really strong, talented person who we align and I can provide a path for them, then, and I can demonstrate that to them and they get it and they can feed it back to me, then, we can just kind of work out the details. I feel like it's much easier than you would think, because again, people are kind of like taking the lead, and they're saying, hey, look, I want to do this because I can see how this would benefit me. And that's the thing, as a founder, that you have to ask is, what value can I bring to you? Because I didn't do that. The longest time I just, I got a great company, come make some money. I can pay you and you get to work with me, which, may or may not be exciting to them, but I didn't know, right? So let people tell you, and then you have to kind of tailor it to what it is they want. Now, if you can provide that to them, you have to be honest too. You can't just make stuff up. If you can provide that to them, if you can see like, hey, I can create this path for you, and this is where we're looking to go, then yeah, confirm it, make sure that they understand it. But if you can't, then don't promise it. Again, that goes against our nature of, the old, like, you always want what you can't have. And you don't want to have the patience to wait for somebody else, right? You just kind of want to get it done and move on. And I think a lot of us entrepreneurs operate that way, for sure. I know I did it for a long time.
Yeah, me too. I'd love for you to talk about some of the components in your book about identifying the type of individual.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that?
Yeah, totally. So I kind of come to the conclusion, or I have this theory that people are kind of have a DNA about them, right? And so in the way it breaks down in a workplace is you have builders, you have improvers, and then you have maintainers. So if you think about large companies, they already like have been built. They might have some people then they're like that make things better, but for the most part, most large companies have people who just maintain. They come in, they kind of push their buttons that they're supposed to push. They stay in their lane, and that's what they do. Those are entirely like not valuable for startups. Startups need builders. And what I mean by builders is builders are the people who like come in, they see trash on the ground, they pick it up, they throw it away, and then they go take the trash can out to the thing, and then they look for opportunity to get stuff done. You don't have to really tell them what to do because they're motivated to do, right? So, your first, 10 to 20 people that you hire, like everybody who's in a leadership position needs to be a builder. And so, and what's interesting is when you have conversations with people in our discovery call, people will, when you ask them, what is it you desire doing? Like, what, if you could design your next opportunity from scratch, what would that look like for you? And people will actually use the language like, you know what, I really want to build something. I've been kind of in this role where I'm doing this, but I'm a builder. And I just pulled these things from basically language that I heard people feeding back to me. I want to come in, I want to like work on a project that's really cool and make it better. That's an improver, right? So that might be like, hey, I've got some systems in place I need help with, or I need some operational help. Then come in and do that, right? But for the most part, you need to be thinking in your mind as you're interviewing people, and they're giving you language. It's like they're giving you kind of what it is they desire. Is this person a builder? Are they an improver or a maintainer? And maintainers, by the way, focus like a huge clue is they tend to focus on money. Well, what's the opportunity pay? And can I what kind of benefits? It's 401k. They start asking questions like that. Which, by the way, as a startup, You, you have none of that.
What 401k?
Yeah. 401 what? WD-40 what? So it's really important that you kind of think about as you're having these conversations with people, like, is this person a builder? Yeah. And you're going to talk to probably 80% of the people you're going to talk to are going to be maintainers. So be aware you're going to have to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince or princess.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because for those of you who haven't read the book Traction by Gino Wickman, that's a really good one. And I think Rick also references a lot of the core components around the entrepreneurial operating system, or EOS, because he references visionaries versus integrators too, which is maybe
Yeah.
2 versus 3 categories. But it's so true for all of us in the entrepreneurial space. It's just finding that right co-founder or leadership to kind of help you get there. And how you make a decision, how you trade cash versus equity, all those really complicated things, because you got to try and check your ego and those insecurities at the door for a lot of it.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, we kind of designed our hiring operating system to plug into EOS because I was fortunate enough to meet Gino and was able to get him to write the foreword for my book. And so Gino, it was interesting because what he said to me was, I don't really write forewords for people because, but I read like about half your book and I went, oh, this plays so well into EOS. Because they talk about the people piece and making sure you have the right people on the bus, and you're evaluating that on a quarterly basis usually. Do I have the right person in the right seat? So where we come in is, okay, now we help you hire the right person for the right seat, and then all you have to do is manage them. Makes your job so much easier. I wish I would have kind of learned this probably 20 years prior, when I still had hair, like Vincent's.
It's a virtual background.
Not the hair.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, and I think kind of bring it full circle, is EOS, which again is being heavily adopted all around the world, even in Hawaii for that matter.
Yeah.
Sets vision as the number one thing. Going back to what you've talked about of values, what is the alignment? How does that push? So for those of you who are interested in learning more, I think it's really great to watch some of the case studies they have on YouTube and their website too. And just immerse yourself. If you folks are the lead founder or the core founders, it's your job to set this. If you don't, kind of what Rick was saying earlier, is you're gonna get that big cash inflow and you have to hire a whole bunch, and it's a death spiral.
Yeah, I don't like burning through cash. I don't know about you, but what's interesting, so there's another book that Gino wrote too. It's called Rocket Fuel, and it explains the relationship of the founders and the kind of the concept of a visionary and an integrator. And most of us as CEOs tend to be more visionaries, and so we need somebody to come in and operate the business and help with the operational side. So just something to be aware of, but there's a lot of structure in and around how you can build that out, or what's important components from that.
Well, Rick, as we wrap things up here, I'd love for you to share any other ahas or stories. I mean, it sounds like this is really your purpose.
Yeah. I fought it for a very long time because I wanted to go surfing, but yeah, it's always been really important to me that startup founders fail. I mean, don't fail. Sorry, I don't want you to fail. I want you not to fail. I've worked with so many really cool, great founders who have had great ideas and they just imploded, right? And every time I've looked at it or we've had conversations, it's gone down to the people, right? The wrong people on the bus. Great idea, but it just all imploded. And in fact, most investors that I've ever talked to, they always lead with, I look at the team first. and I invest in the team. It's about the jockey, not the horse, right? So you should be really cognizant of that. And if you're having problems, you need to have conversations and make changes. I actually just helped somebody out the other day who they've got I just kind of coached this person through a conversation they had to have with one of their co-founders who didn't really want to be there. And so they had a conversation, and what ended up happening was the person just said, well, okay, I don't want to be here. I guess I'll just split, which worked out great for them. But if you're not having those conversations and then you're just getting frustrated because work isn't getting done and things are going wrong, then you've got to really be mindful, and you really have to get that really quickly. Not let it linger.
Stop the bleed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to heal your career wounds.
Oh yeah, good book plug. By the way, I have read it. I'm a believer. At first, when you published it, I was like, "What?" But I bought it, and yeah, I'm excited for you. Well, hey, as we wrap things up here, any final comments or words for all these folks out there?
No, but just being a startup founder is hard, and make it easy on yourself. And I feel like once you kind of get that foundation forward, it becomes not as hard. It's still hard, but you're not fighting the uphill battle. And I would encourage each and every one of you to spend a half day, maybe go drink some wine by the sea with your co-founders and figure out what your values are if you don't know them, and jot them down, and then talk to your teams about it. Is this really who we are, how we operate, and then build language around it. Hey, are we digging deeper? Are we taking lead and carving our own path? Are we doing, so I make little phrases out of our values. So again, it makes people feel part of the tribe.
Yep. Feeling like they belong.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, I really appreciate you. I thank you so much for your time and your sharing. For those of you who'd like to reach out, Rick's got 22,000 followers on LinkedIn. So I think he has more than anyone else I know, at least within the Hawaii ecosystem. So I highly encourage you to reach out to him. If you know Chuck and Ann over at High Tech Hawaii, they're on the map now. So I'm really excited to see that. And just to kind of close things off, if you aren't familiar with Ensign, which is part of our strategic partnership, National Security Innovation Network, they've got the Hack for Defense Engineering 401 course happening this fall. And then Katie Talladay is teaching the Hack for Environment, the GO 468 in the spring. So really appreciate all of you for joining us. Again, we will post this recording if you'd like to share it to others. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, you're welcome. And one last thing, if anybody has any questions, they want to reach out to me, feel free. I'm pretty approachable. If you want to connect up with me on LinkedIn, it's a great way to kind of start building your recruiting process, because I'm connected to a lot of people, especially a lot of people in Hawaii. So
right on. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Take care.
Bye.